Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. This is The Excerpt. Today, Congress passes a bill that puts the future of TikTok up in the air, plus the latest from Gaza and a look at how Donald Trump continues to campaign from the courthouse. Congress has passed a long-awaited $95 billion foreign aid bill. The Senate approved the package yesterday. It'll set $60 billion to support Ukraine, $17 billion for Israel, $9 billion in humanitarian aid for Gaza and elsewhere, and $8 billion for allies in the Indo-Pacific. The move passed with an overwhelming bipartisan vote. The package also includes legislation that would force TikTok's Chinese parent company to divest from the social media app or face an effective ban in the United States. For more on that, I spoke with USA Today Congress and campaigns reporter Riley Beggin. Riley, thanks for hopping on The Excerpt today.
Hey, happy to be here.
So, Riley, the Senate has passed this bill. What does it do as it pertains to TikTok?
So this bill has been tweaked a little bit since the last time I talked to you about it. It would give TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, up to a year to sell the company. If they do not do that, then there would be an effective ban in the United States. That means that the app stores can't offer them, there can't be any updates to the app, and web hosting services also can't host them. So you can't find it on the internet, for example.
So, the lawmakers in both chambers who supported this bill, why did they say it's necessary, and what issues do opponents take here?
The argument from proponents of the bill is that this is a national security issue. They've essentially said that ByteDance, which is headquartered in Beijing, gives the Chinese government access to Americans' data that could be weaponized, essentially. So they say that TikTok is being used to spread propaganda to Americans and that it's being used as a surveillance tool. We haven't seen public evidence of that, but these senators are getting intelligence briefings. And there's, of course, reporting from multiple outlets that TikTok is not necessarily using the data in the way that the American subsidiary claims it is. For opponents of the bill, they say that this is a First Amendment issue, that if you restrict a specific social media app, it has implications for freedom of speech and that it could hurt small businesses. There are a lot of creators who make money on the app, people who would not be able to afford advertising if they didn't have access to it. So those are sort of the main arguments we hear from people who want to oppose the bill.
And how is TikTok responding to this legislation?
They have gone all out to oppose it over the last several weeks since it's been gaining steam in Congress. They have been blasting out a message early on to their supporters to call members of Congress. Some lawmakers sort of implied to us that that backfired and made them want to ban it more. Though, of course, I will caveat they are not using that word ban. They argue that it is not a ban because, of course, it forces ByteDance to sell the company. But they've also got influencers to come to the Hill to talk to lawmakers. The CEO has come to talk to senators. And there's, of course, tons of money going into lobbying these lawmakers over the last several weeks. Now that the bill has passed, TikTok has said this is not the end of the road. We are going to mount a legal campaign, which, of course, we can talk a little bit about more. And TikTok has been making the same arguments that I said that the opponents were making, that this is a First Amendment issue.
As for what this means for Americans, Riley, just how big of a deal is this? And, what does polling tell us about how Americans feel about this move?
So there are around 170 million American users of TikTok, so it does have a big impact on people. I will say that if you're going to see an effect of this, it's going to be a while from now. And as I mentioned, we expect this to get caught up in a legal debate, which probably will delay it further. So don't expect TikTok to disappear from your phone overnight. That is not what's going to happen here. But, overall, the public sentiment that we have seen from polling on this is around 38% of Americans in December said that they would support a ban. That's down from 50% last year in March. But those numbers switch quite a bit when we talk about young people. 41% of people under 30 oppose a TikTok ban.
And Riley, as you mentioned, this may not be the end of the road. What legal battles still remain?
TikTok has pledged to fight this. As I mentioned, they said this is a First Amendment issue. They have also raised concerns about the impact on small businesses. And TikTok has had success with this in the past. Former President Donald Trump tried to ban TikTok. That was stopped by a federal judge. The state of Montana also attempted to do that recently in the state, and that was stopped by a federal judge there. So, there's a high bar to make this argument that we can impact First Amendment rights for the sake of national security. So I think we're going to have to follow closely how this plays out in the court system.
All right. Riley Beggin covers Congress and campaigns for USA Today. Thank you, Riley.
Thank you.
Israeli bombs pounded northern Gaza yesterday as Hamas's military wing called for an escalation against Israel. Meanwhile, David Satterfield, the U.S. regional envoy for humanitarian issues, said the risk of famine in Gaza, especially in the north, was very high. The renewed shelling and bombing of northern Gaza comes almost 4 months after the Israeli army said it was drawing down troops there, saying then it had pushed Hamas out. Stateside protests continued yesterday at Columbia, NYU, and other colleges around the country. The protests have fueled a national debate over free speech and student demonstrations amid growing unrest over the fate of Palestinians in Gaza and concerns for the safety of Jewish students at home. Dozens of protesters were arrested Monday at pro-Palestinian demonstrations at NYU and Yale University in Connecticut. Columbia University President Manoush Shafiq said last night that it's essential a protester encampment be dismantled. You can follow along with all the latest on usatoday.com. The Department of Justice announced yesterday that it'll pay nearly $139 million to survivors of Larry Nasser's sexual abuse. That's part of a settlement stemming from the FBI's mishandling of the initial allegations. USA Today Sports and the Wall Street Journal first reported last week that a settlement had been agreed upon and would stretch into 9 figures. The money will be distributed across 139 victims. Olympic champions Simone Biles, Michaela Maroney, and Ali Reisman were among the victims who filed claims with the Department of Justice in 2022, roughly a year after the release of a report by the department's Inspector General. The report found that FBI officials failed to respond to allegations of abuse that they received involving Nasser with the utmost seriousness and urgency in 2015, a delay that allowed the abuse to continue. Nasser, the former U.S. women's national gymnastics team doctor and Michigan State employee, was found to have sexually assaulted more than 500 women and girls under the guise of providing medical treatment. He's now serving what will amount to a lifetime prison sentence. Former media executive David Pecker again took the witness stand yesterday in former President Donald Trump's New York hush money trial. Pecker testified that he used the National Enquirer to promote Trump's 2016 campaign interests, including stifling a story about an alleged love child of Trump's. Pecker's actions were part of a so-called catch-and-kill conspiracy with Trump to kill stories that could hurt Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, according to prosecutors. Yesterday's proceedings began with arguments over whether Trump should be held in contempt for allegedly violating a gag order. Prosecutors say Trump has violated that order at least 10 times, and the judge should not only fine the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, but also warn him he could get jail time if things don't change. Trump has complained the gag order silences him, but not others. But even this week, Trump again attacked potential witness Michael Cohen outside the courtroom, saying Cohen, quote, got caught lying, pure lying, unquote, in a previous trial. Meanwhile, as Trump's hush money trial heats up, he continues to try and campaign from the courthouse. I spoke with USA Today national political correspondent David Jackson about this ongoing strategy. David, hello, sir.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for hopping back on the excerpt. So, David, let's just start with this. What has the scene been like outside the courthouse? Are Donald Trump supporters showing up to this trial?
No, not really. It's been pretty quiet outside the courthouse. In fact, there are probably more anti-Trumpers out there than pro-Trumpers. And it's been something of a disappointment to the president because I think he expected a lot more people to show up so that he could go out there and proclaim his innocence in front of a crowd, but he hasn't really been able to do that.
Yeah, so David, then how is Trump now campaigning based off this hush money trial?
He's basically bootstrapping campaign events in and around the trial. For example, last week after one of the sessions, he visited a bodega in Harlem to talk about crime, kind of a standard campaign hit. It just happened to be in New York City, which is where he happens to be on trial and will be for the next 6 or 8 weeks. He also had a foreign affairs event. He had a meeting with the president of Poland last week. So he's basically using his spare time, which is rare these days, to do traditional campaign events. They just happen to be confined to New York. He's also had a few plans fall through. During the weekend recess, he planned to do a traditional campaign rally in Wilmington, North Carolina, but he had to cancel that because of bad weather. He also, I think, as I understand it, he planned to do some kind of speech on Friday, but he shelved those plans because we had the incident with the man who immolated himself in protest of the trial. So it's been a day-by-day thing, kind of on the spur of the moment, but he's basically trying to campaign from the courthouse.
David, where do voters stand at this point? Are voters nationally changing their minds at all about what a conviction here might mean for their support or lack thereof for Trump? And really, just how significant are these legal issues shaping up to be for Trump's electability?
So far, the polls have indicated that a significant chunk of voters would change their mind about Trump if he is convicted. They wouldn't vote for a convicted felon, and there have been estimates as high as 10% of Trump's base might feel this way. So obviously, that's a chunk of change he can't afford to lose. So when he makes these campaign appeals, those are the people he's talking to, the people who say they may turn off of him if he's convicted. But we really don't know until it actually happens. And a lot of Trump people say that he could be acquitted in this trial, or there could be a hung jury, and that would help him with these people. So it's too hard to say right now, but there's a significant number of voters who are really on the fence about Trump because of this trial.
And David, what are we hearing from the Biden camp at this point when it comes to this hush money trial and Trump's legal issues writ large?
Well, not much publicly. They say they don't want to get in the way of an opponent who's in the process of destroying himself. So they basically confine themselves to little comments and little jokes. I mean, President Biden, during his speech, he referred to his predecessor and noted that he's been pretty busy lately. Another campaign statement referred to Trump's stormy positions on abortion, which, of course, is a reference to witness Stormy Daniels, who's involved in the trial. So little things like that, making little snide comments about Trump. But they're really not engaging on the issues of the trial or of Trump's involvement in it. They're kind of letting that play for itself.
And, Trump's got all kinds of other legal sagas. What's coming down the pike, David? And should we expect him to continue with a similar strategy of campaigning or trying to campaign from the courthouse?
Well, that's another question that we don't know the answer to. He's basically looking at the potential of 3 criminal trials, but he's trying to delay all of them. There is a distinct possibility that he might be able to do that. First, he's got the 2 trials, one in Washington, one in Atlanta, on allegations that he tried to steal the election from President Joe Biden. But the Supreme Court is considering an appeal from Trump in one of those cases that would basically make him immune from prosecution for any actions he took while he was president. So if the Supreme Court agrees with him on that, that could knock out the federal case and the Georgia case. He's also got another trial about illegally handling classified information that's scheduled to start in May in Florida, but the judge has been very sympathetic to Trump on some of his pretrial appeals, so there's also the possibility that trial could be delayed as well, all of which means that this might be the only trial he has to deal with before Election Day on November 5th.
All right, interesting stuff. David Jackson is a national political correspondent with USA Today. Thank you, David.
Thanks, sir.
Some good news for workers. The Biden administration announced a new rule yesterday that would make millions of white-collar workers newly eligible for overtime pay. Starting July 1st, the rule would increase the threshold where executive, administrative, and professional employees are exempt from overtime pay to $43,888 from the current $35,568. That change would make an additional million workers eligible to receive time-and-a-half wages for each hour they put in beyond a 40-hour week. Then, on January 1st, the threshold would rise further to more than $58,000, covering another 3 million workers. Also yesterday, the Federal Trade Commission approved a rule to ban agreements commonly signed by workers not to join their employers' rivals or launch competing businesses, which it says limit worker mobility and suppress wages. Contact restored. That was the message relieved NASA officials shared after the agency regained full contact with the Voyager 1 space probe, the most distant human-made object in the universe, scientists have announced. For the first time since November, the spacecraft is returning usable data about the health and status of its onboard engineering systems, according to a NASA press release on Monday. The nearly half-century-old probe, now 15.1 billion miles from Earth, has continually defied expectations for its lifespan as it moves farther into the uncharted territory of the cosmos. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, back tomorrow with more of the excerpt from USA Today.